So over the last several weeks, we've kind of brought together, or sorry, we've shared a bunch of different topics and around different problems that folks have. Everything from, how do I get myself out there? What kind, how can I use education to grow my business? How can I go out and find clients, people to talk to, people who might be interested in what I'm doing. And today's session with my friend Natalie Nixon, I think is going to help bring a bunch of them together. One of the topics from a few weeks ago with our friend Janelle Allen was about education. We talked a lot about how education is often the best marketing, and one of the things that I hope has come through in a lot of these sessions is that there is value in being proactive and sharing what you know, and being able to give the right things away to a potential prospect to earn their trust. Natalie is going to take that one step further and help you sort of look at that space maybe a little more holistically and say, where and how do you navigate from offering your value for free to bringing those people into your world as a client? How do you navigate from free to paid? Natalie's one of my favorite creative thinkers and facilitators in Philadelphia, so I'm really excited to see what she's going to do with this topic. Thank you so much for being here, Natalie. Thanks for sharing with the Philly freelance community. And I'm going to let you... Oh, before we do that, I'm sorry, before I let you take it away, real quick, as I mentioned earlier, Natalie mentioned this as well, this is going to be an interactive session, so you're going to need a paper and pen for that as well. And then lastly, when it comes to questions, we're going to do questions down in the chat room. So there will be time for questions at the end. But if you've got questions throughout, if you want to drop those in the chat room, I will be your chat proxy. So go ahead and drop those in there as we go. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Natalie. Thanks for being here, Natalie.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Alex, thanks for having me. Catherine, it's awesome to see you. I've always enjoyed working with both of you, so it's a real pleasure to spend some time with the Philly freelance community. And what I've done is I've prepared some slides, so I'm going to share my screen momentarily. And there will be some question prompts throughout, so that's why I've asked you to grab a piece of paper and a pen. I'm just going to give you an opportunity to do a few brain dumps now so that you don't leave the webinar thinking, oh yeah, those were a couple of good points and I'll get to that later. At least I'm hoping to give you a jump start in this. And I'm a creativity strategist. I'm president of Figure Eight Thinking. One of the things I like to always remind people is that creativity loves constraints. Constraints on time, constraints on money, constraints on people talent. So in this constrained amount of time, I'm going to encourage you to just start to generate some ideas around what I'm calling, a topic I'm calling level up. I'm a big fan of the hip hop superstar Ciara, and she has a great song called Level Up. This is my version of Love. I should have had that as some theme music. I didn't think about that. I think the buying the rights would be way out of my budget. But anyway,
We'll make that your walk-on music next time.
What did you say?
We'll make that your walk-on music next time.
We'll make it walk-on music next time. Awesome. Okay, guys, so I'm gonna share my screen now. Okay. So I was asked to share a bit about, how do you know as an entrepreneur about when you should be gifting and giving your work and when you should be asking to be paid. And this is really intro level one. I'm not even going to get into the price point variations, but just discerning and making those choices. And it's really about, it ultimately comes down to having a clarity about who you are, what your offering is, and knowing your worth. So let's get started on how you can level up. I actually wanted to start with this image because since early March of this year, when COVID-19 became much more of a reality for us, I went into an extreme mode of sharing and giving. And I'll explain why in a moment, but I want to share with this image. This comes from a Harvard Business Review article, which was posted the first, maybe second week of March. The title of the article is "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." And there's two takeaways from the article that I really like and appreciate. The article is really a conversation between the author Scott Baronato and one of the world's, or maybe the world's, most renowned grief expert, a gentleman by the name of David Kessler. And David Kessler was asked to share about what we commonly call the 5 stages of grief. So here's my first takeaway. The 5 stages of grief, which are sequentially given in order as denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and then acceptance. My first takeaway was that those stages of grief are not linear. So if at any given moment during the past, now 2.5 months or so, you have felt like you're going to bargain with your client or your employer or with the local grocery store about coming in or out with or without a mask and how often you can convene in person, and then you go into anger, and then you go into acceptance, completely normal, right? Even more so compounded, my husband and I were talking about the deep fatigue he and I were feeling, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, 2 weekends ago. This was the beginning of, it was one after another, the curtain had been pulled back on the United States of America on our racism and violence from police and the murder of George Floyd. And we were sitting in our kitchen and we were like, we're so tired. Like we felt it in our bones, physically, the fatigue, the tiredness. We call it resilience fatigue as Black Americans. And, still that I felt sadness, I felt anger, I felt, glimmers of hope by how diverse the protests are. But at any rate, these stages of grief are nonlinear. So it's completely normal, just like as a check-in, if you felt that nonlinear thing. But the other piece that David Kessler said, which was a big takeaway from this article, is that there should actually be a 6th stage of grief that should be added. So if we just ended acceptance, we're kind of ending on a plateau. We actually, he says, should end on meaning. And I feel that so acutely, especially with all the social justice protests that are going on in all of so many cities in the States right now, that if we ended at acceptance as our stage of grief, as it relates to social injustice right now and racism, that's so like such a Debbie Downer. But if we end on what's the meaning and purpose that we can make out of this time and out of this moment, that really is converting grief into something exceptional. And as a creativity strategist, creativity is all about the business of meaning making and purpose making. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this image, share the context about grieving, and really get us to that higher level transformative point about meaning making and purpose. So when you're thinking about leveling up and figuring out what of your services do you offer for free and what for pay, it's really about being very clear on the meaning that your services are giving to others. So toggling between free or pay often feels like walking on a tightrope, which is why I chose this image. There's a lot of uncertainty often in ourselves about whether or not we should be asking for people to pay. And I also started with that image, this image right here of the woman in the mask, because in the past 8 weeks, I've been offering a ton of content for free. When COVID-19 first broke more overtly here in the States, I immediately started collaborating with past clients, potential clients, organizations I admire from afar. And I gave a series of free webinars on everything from design thinking to creativity and leadership to foresight and scenario planning, really because I, on a very human level, was acutely aware of the pain and the angst that people were going through with COVID-19, the amount of uncertainty that we are all feeling, economic job loss that so many people are struggling through, and my real core belief that as a creativity strategist, I have something of value to offer to kind of recenter and refocus people. And what's happened as a result of that is some invitations then to actually engage for paid engagements, which is a beautiful thing when that happens. It doesn't always happen, and that wasn't the impetus, but it's often a wonderful outcome of trying to figure out, should I give this for free away or pay? And I'm a big believer in that energetically, these things really matter, right? We often forget in my work, which tends to fall under the category of change management, culture change, when I'm consulting larger organizations. Organizations are organisms. Markets are made up of people. Therefore, they are imperfect, inconsistent, and not predictive. And if you begin to think of your interactions with your clients, with the marketplace in that way, then that energetic type of principle that I'm talking about, of that virtuous circle of reciprocity, is very real. So it totally pays off in the end, just from even a feel-good standpoint to give it away. So you first have to really identify for yourself, what's the purpose of the free? And so I already explained that for me, in the beginning of March, the purpose of the free actually was not about biz dev and business development and client generation. It was really about connection. It was really about, I'm feeling uncertain. I have a few ideas about how my particular perspective on the world could be helpful to others. What do you think? And it was really to start conversation. And then, I have a book coming out in a few weeks, because there's nothing like launching a book in the middle of a pandemic. But my book, The Creativity Leap, comes out June 23rd. So then it became, maybe this could also help with the promotion of my book. So that became a lot of the association with it. And I got to tell you, the first time that I collaborated with Christopher Plant of Kismet Co-Work, I was going to be happy if 20 people registered for the event and 12 people showed up, and was shocked that we got over 180 people to register and about 125 people actually showed up for the event. So you never know. You just got to put it out there. So here's a little framework. I'm not even going to take full credit for this, because I was talking to John, my husband, about preparing for this conversation. And he actually helped me to come up with this paradigm. And this framework is about when you're trying to figure out, do you ask for money or do you give it for free? FO stands for, you got to discern if this is about free in order to obtain clients, or is this about free in order to retain? So on the left is free to obtain, and on the right is free to retain. So free to obtain is when you don't know this person from Jack. They've just maybe stumbled upon something you posted on social media. Especially now, it's not going to be, you met at a conference or anything like that. And it's really about, does this make sense to gift and give away? Because I want to just cultivate the relationship, right? And all the way to the other end of the spectrum, where it's free in order to retain, right? Because there's a lot of goodwill deposits that we must make in this relationship of working with clients, because 90% of business is about relationship. It is about people feeling like you get them. You get them not just on a functional level, on that level of really understanding what they do for a living, what their needs are for their clients, but that you get them on a social and an emotional level. And I've just shared with you a framework that I love to use that comes from my work in design thinking, which is that we have to solve the problems of our clients on a functional, a social, and an emotional level. And if you're only solving the problem of your client on that functional level, are the trains running on time? right? Does the app work, right? Do they like the thingamajig that I've developed with the experience I'm building out, right? We also have to be able to meet the needs of our clients on a social and emotional level. So that free to obtain or free to retain, if you just want to even jot this down on your piece of paper, this paradigm, and this becomes a really helpful starting place to identify who in your network you want to be giving out work and offerings in order to obtain their business and in order to retain their business. So one of the ways to do that, and when Alex and I were talking about my contributing to the series, I mentioned this word, and he's like, that sounds really interesting. I think that would be a super helpful point to share out. So I'm actually framing our work together today around this idea of really having clarity on what is your heuristic, right? So what's a heuristic? A heuristic is essentially a rule of thumb. It's your rule of thumb. So for example, Run DMC has a heuristic, which is different from Jay-Z's heuristic, which is very different from Sting's heuristic, and even more distinct from Sade's heuristic, right? You know a Sade song from the first three measures, right? You know a Stones song from the first three measures. It is their rule of thumb. It is their je ne sais quoi. It's their secret sauce. So what I want to focus in on today is really helping you to start thinking about what is my heuristic? What's my secret sauce? And so in order to do that, I want to give a personal example, give you my example of how I've been thinking through my heuristic. And I want to be really transparent and let you know, I started my company Figure Eight Thinking as a side hustle. I was a professor for 16 years. I started in 2015 after giving a TEDx Philadelphia talk. I started getting invited into organizations to talk about the future of work and all that jazz, no pun intended. Because my perspective really was that the future of work is jazz. That's another story. And then it was really, so again, it was my side hustle. And then in 2016, I made the decision, I actually want to move on from academia and I actually want to build up my company solely. So this month, June of 2020, I'm celebrating 3 years of really building out Figure Eight Thinking as my sole business focus and venture. And so what I want to be transparent about is that I didn't start out in 2015 and definitely not in 2017 either, having a clarity on what my heuristic is. It is something that I've cultivated and gotten clarity on as a process. So I'm not expecting you to think, if you're feeling freaked out, it's a healthy freaked outness. If you're not really clear what it is, it's a process. And you actually might be a little more clear or closer to it than you realize. So I want to share like what my heuristic is, just to give you an example, then we're going to go back to you. Okay, so for me, my heuristic is really built out around this burning question that drives me every day, which is, what is creativity? So what about creativity? What's its relationship to innovation? How is it significant for businesses? And why should folks in corporate tower buildings even care about creativity when a word like creativity is not even uttered in the corporate boardroom? So that's the question that really drives me. And what I've come to realize is that creativity is not this woo-woo frilly add-on. It's a productivity play. And it's a competency that we've got to exercise, especially in what we're now calling the fourth industrial revolution, where technology is ubiquitous. Creativity is absolutely a productivity play, where if there's an algorithm to take over a task, it's the human superpower of creativity that has to be exercised and amplified in the midst of all this technology. So I've defined creativity as our capacity and ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems. I created a card game around it. That wonder rigor principle has really become my hook. It's the way I frame everything that I talk about and the ways that I try to help my clients. Oh, sorry. This is also just pointing out that this stems from, if I can geek out with you a bit, chaos theory. So creativity is actually a complex system. Specifically, it is a chaotic system. A chaord is a word that D. Hock created, and D. Hock was the president of Visa, the credit card company. And this comes from, you know, I have to give credit to all those years I spent as a scholar, as an academic, and really loving to delve into this kind of theoretical work. It has totally informed the way I think about creativity now. So you see that mirrored in the way I've defined creativity, right? So wonder is that chaos piece, rigor is the order piece. And chaos isn't anarchy, chaos is randomness. Order isn't control, order is structure. So then I went ahead and I developed this what I call the 3I creativity framework. I trademarked it, another part of my heuristic. And this is how I explain, this is how we can actually exercise creativity through inquiry or curiosity, by being more improvisational and adaptive, and by acting on our intuition. And then I went further, and this is more my most recent hooks in my heuristic, is to really draw a bold, dark line for anyone who's still not convinced of the business ROI of creativity, right? That creativity, once again, it's not those woo-woo things. There's not a faint dotted line between business ROI and creativity. There's a bold, dark line. So when we're creative, we have more inventive thinking that leads to different revenue, business models and revenue streams. When we are acting creatively, we have to be more collaborative. That improves productivity, efficiencies, and costs get lowered. And when we are creative, we've got to get outside of our own heads and look outward for inspiration and be customer obsessed. That can lead to more human-centered products and services. We have an increase in sales, increase in value, and brand loyalty. Okay, so that's my heuristic, right? And that's really been a build out over a good 5 years. It incrementally grew, but there were elements of it always there. The important thing is I kept asking myself, how can I simply explain what it is that I do? Because I was driven to do that by clients. They weren't overtly asking me to do that, but I learned very quickly I was going to capture their attention more quickly if I could connect the dots between what matters to me and what their needs are. Again, if I could solve problems for them on a functional, social, and emotional level. So here's our first exercise. In order to answer this question of what's your heuristic, I'm going to give you 90 seconds, and I have my handy dandy clock here. And I would like you to make a list of what you consider your assets to be. And please don't start yet, just listen for a bit. I want you to think about your intellectual assets, your physical, tangible assets, your cultural assets, your social assets. And I'm launching an online creativity course this summer. And in the build out of the course, I've been learning a lot from Danielle Leslie. She, you may have seen her on Instagram. She does a lot of helping people create online courses. And one of the things that Danielle Leslie says, which I so love, you know, maybe before you worked for yourself and had your own business, and maybe even still now when you are bidding for business, sometimes the answer you would get after an interview if you weren't hired is, they weren't a fit. They weren't a culture fit. And one of the things that Danielle Leslie says, it's not about being a culture fit, it's about being a culture add, right? What are the things that make you so particularly special and unique? So I want you to make a list. Are there any clarifying questions before we start? Anything in the chat? All right, awesome. So I am going to start my clock right now for exactly 90 seconds. Please begin. Sixty seconds left. 30 seconds left. Okay, 10 more seconds. All right, awesome. Thanks for doing that. Okay. Based on your list of assets, what are 2 elements or characteristics that you would highlight that you could say are part of your heuristic? Just pick 2. You obviously can go back to this list later and you can pick more, you can tweak it, but just gut check. What are 2 elements that you've listed there that you would say would really be part of your heuristic that begin to help you identify your value? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just circle 2 of those words. Please begin. Ten seconds. Okay, awesome. So I have in the past 6 months started doing a lot more coaching. And when I coach people who are freelancers, who are consulting in the nonprofit space, who are part of the creative economy, one of the needs I quickly identified that would be very helpful would be to help them in an active translation. And that active translation is for them to identify the business value of what they do, right? Often, those of us who are practitioners in the creative economy have a jargon that we don't even realize is jargon, right? It's just the way we go about delivering our business, the way we do things. And it's one of the things that will help you in toggling on that tightrope between pay or play. Some of it is timing, right? Some of it is, you have to be really super conscious of the macro environment, COVID-19, social justice, protesting, right? A lot of layoffs, a lot of furloughs. So environmentally, that's one of the factors we think about. We also have that paradigm I shared of free in order to obtain business, free in order to retain business. And there's a whole spectrum that you can map of your clients and potential clients on that. But we also want to really be able to distinctly say what it is that I do, and then what's the business value of what I do. So here's what I mean by business value. And I'm going to, if anyone texts me at the end of this, or I don't know if Alex is going to share your emails, I'm happy to share with you a worksheet I created with these descriptors. So you don't have to, you can do a screenshot if you want, but I can also just share this worksheet. But this is what I call the business value translator, right? So what I want you to be thinking about when you're looking at this slide, when you're listing on the left, what it is that I do, and I'm only gonna ask you to list about 5 things. I then want you to translate, what's the business value of that? Because of that, do I help my clients reduce costs? Do I increase their efficiencies? Remember, with that, when efficiencies are increased, costs do reduce. Do I help them to generate more revenue? As a result of my work, are they increasing market share? Are they gaining new consumer insight? Are they having a greater return on their investment? Is customer satisfaction increasing? Have I helped them to prevent or reduce knowledge transfer? So knowledge transfer is when a company, an organization, without your intervention, they're going to lose people, they're going to lose employees to a competitor. That's a transfer of a whole bunch of institutional knowledge that is priceless. Companies don't like that. So because of your work, are they able to prevent or reduce knowledge transfer? Do you help them to reduce risk because of what you do? Do you help them to increase capital, or that plain old English, money? Do you help them to increase their capacity for, I don't know, community engagement, global awareness, their own capacity for what their employees can do, right? Do you help them to increase sales? Do they have greater brand resonance, or do they reduce risk? So jot down some of these business value results. And now maybe flip your piece of paper over, right on the bottom sheet. I want you to mock up these 2 columns, list out what it is that you do. Just list 5 things that you do, and go back to that list I asked you to generate about your heuristic, your assets, right? So build on this list. Take this list, pick 5 of those things that you do, and then translate them into a business value. Okay, would it be helpful if I leave this slide up maybe? Yeah, okay, so this is what you're gonna mock up on your piece of paper. I'm only gonna give you 60 seconds because I do not want you to overthink this. Jot down 5 things on the left, what I do. Because of that, right, what's the business value? So I'm gonna leave it on this slide so you can see where I want you to translate, okay? And I'm gonna begin my clock for, I'm gonna give you 70 seconds, okay? 1 minute and 10 seconds, all right? Don't overthink it. Ready, begin. Forty seconds. And about 19 seconds. Five seconds. Okay, cool. Awesome. So now let's share. I'm going to stop sharing. Can we do the random breakout rooms? Is that cool? Okay, so here's what you're going to share in your group. Share an element of your heuristic that you realize is distinctively you. What's an asset that you will give for free, and what's a way that you'll convert it to pay? So how about I help you a bit? Let me give you just 30 seconds to think that through before you share, so that when you go into your room, your breakout room, you'll have something to share. But what's an element of your heuristic? Hopefully you've gotten that done. On the spectrum of assets that you have, what's an asset that you would give for free? And what's one way you'll convert it to pay? So for example, I've been giving free webinars. That has converted into a workshop series for pay for one client, for a client I've had. For a new client, that's converted into a for pay different type of webinar because they saw what I can do in this webinar. That's in the first example with a previous client. That series is going to convert into longer term consulting around how they're thinking about themselves strategically, their future state in terms of the foresight work I do. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking, I'll shut up. So answer this question for yourself, just 30 seconds, then we're gonna break out into teams. Please begin. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my deck and let's just meet for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I'd like you to share, and we're going to give you a 1 minute warning when 4 minutes have gone by, okay?
So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. This is going to put you into groups of 2 to 3 people. So you should be able to have those 5 minutes shared among you. And then at the end, if this is the first time with using breakout rooms in Zoom for anybody, at the end you'll get a warning, and then it'll bring everybody back here. So we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Great.
Really, really good. Welcome back, everybody.
Hey guys. So, of course, I am super curious to hear some of the ideas you guys came up with. So I would love for a few of you, maybe 3 of you at least, to share what's an asset that you identify that you would give for free. How would you convert it to pay later? If you want to even share a bit more about any light bulb moments or anything more about your heuristic, would love to hear. Who wants to share? Yay, Kara. Hi.
Hey, good to see you again, Natalie.
You too.
So my breakout group, we talked a little bit about it might be valuable for me to use sort of a webinar format to kind of talk broadly, if generically, about some of the approaches that I use with clients, and maybe develop sort of a generic form or some of the tools that I've developed with clients. And that could be converted to, sort of paid consulting to translate that into their specific environment. Because I feel like that translation work, as you mentioned, is a large part. So, one-pagers or template forms can help people start the process, but they may be, in their water so much that they don't know quite how to apply it sufficiently in their organization.
That's right. They're fish. They don't know that it's water, right? So I love that. Can you share more about what was one element, asset that you highlighted about what you do and the way you do what you do?
So I'm very sort of visual communication oriented. So coming up with simple templates, forms, ideas that are earworms in that regard. So something that you can return to pretty quickly and adopt pretty quickly. But again, once you have a notion of that, being able to see how it can apply in the different circumstances within one's organization can be part of the work.
Awesome. And so you notice that I went as far as to trademark some of my stuff. Actually, it was the folks at Pixel Parlor who are my web designers, and they helped me to design my brand logo. They actually advised me to do that 6 years ago. And it was a pain in the ass, legally speaking, but I'm actually really happy that I did that, because now it's become part of my platform. As you saw, there's a whole card game I developed. There's a whole workshop series I'm going to continue to develop. I'm launching this online creativity course. Don't shirk away from, however corny it may feel, to create, in your case, Kara, the je ne sais quoi, the ABCs, whatever moniker or mnemonic that you want to give your shtick, because it's the hook for people to hang their hat on. It makes you more recognizable. It helps them to access you and your acts of translation for them. So for example, I was coaching a consulting team. They consult the nonprofit area, and one of the things I was working on with them was to really spread their themselves as a brand, expanded as a brand digitally and through LinkedIn. And so I was working with them on an article they were writing, which for them, they could just write in their sleep, right? It's something they just know and understand in their consulting work. And so they had 3 examples in their short essay for LinkedIn. Maybe it was like 500 words, 450 words, not super long at all. And it just so happened that, I mean, I could see, because I can zoom out, and I know it's water. They're in it all the time. I could zoom out and I said, oh, the 3 examples they had began with the letter E, the letter A, the letter R. And I was like, oh, you're helping them with the era of blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh my God, that's awesome. That's the way we could be selling it and marketing it, right? So, and you think about this time of need that so many clients and companies have. So do not totally embrace the corniness of however you can frame what it is that you do. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Someone else.
I think I saw Lisa, you had your hand up before. Go for it.
Awesome. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. So what we were talking about in the breakout room is something that I almost wasn't even thinking would fit into the model that you were suggesting. But I realized yesterday I took care of a couple things for some clients. I had gotten a security notification. I do work with WordPress, and there was a security notification for a plugin that a variety of my clients use. And normally my procedure is to send an email and see what they wanted to do, and then, put a project together and a whole rigmarole, which doesn't take a lot of time, but it required them to acknowledge that I had contacted them. So I decided to just streamline it because we're all in so much chaos, and why even burden the people when I already had access? And it wasn't that I needed to ask for access to what I was working on. And I simply did it for free. And I was concerned, well, would they then think I was going to do all of them for free? So I updated their security risk, but not everything that needed to be updated. Sent them a note, all of them said thank you. And one of them, it looks like we're going to have a renewal of a regular care plan that had been suspended during this kind of COVID time. And it just worked nicely. I wasn't really expecting that necessarily, but one of the things that I try to exude is being proactive and trying to help my clients not only generate revenue, but to also prevent chaos, avoidable, simple chaos. And that is what I did the other day.
That's nice. I hear embedded in that language, your own kind of heuristic messaging, if you work on that further. Here's what I love about what you just shared, Lisa. It points out two primal fears that I myself have felt. Remember, I came from academia. My background is in anthropology and fashion. I worked in the fashion industry as an entrepreneurial hat designer. Then I worked in global sourcing. And then I spent 16 years in academia. And to my shock, academia turned out to be one of the most, what's the word? Not closeted, but just not collaborative at all. People are valued for their deep specialization, their deep expertise. And it was a learning curve for me. But here's the two primal fears that we have about giving it away. Mm-hmm. Primal fear number one is, if I give it away, and you kind of shared this, Lisa, they won't need me anymore. Oh no, if I give this to them, they won't call me again, right? Not true, right? They will still need further clarification. There's ways that I understand about how to scale what I do, how to contextualize what I share. I'm just giving the tip of the iceberg, right? And even if they do go off and they try to do it themselves, at least 50% of the time, they circle back around because they don't have the bandwidth, right? They really don't have the time. They really don't have the skill, and they need the fresh eyes perspective. So that's primal fear number one. They won't need me anymore. Primal fear number two is they'll copy me. They'll rip me off, right? Well, part of that, I assuage through trademarking a couple of my things. So that's part of how I assuage it. But you can look on my YouTube channel. So much of the things that I talk about, I share and I post. And again, that for me is that energetically speaking, virtuous cycle, that principle of reciprocity. And by reciprocity, I don't mean quid pro quo. Right? My husband's an attorney, so he's really broken down for me what that term means. It's not like, I'll give you this if you give me that. No. Reciprocity is that flow that we often talk about in creativity as well, right? It doesn't come back immediately. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it's years. I mean, I've gotten emails and calls from people who said, I heard you speak 2 years ago at blah, 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 and my socks are blown away, and I've been looking for the time to call. And like, cool, awesome, right? So, but it also, you won't be constipated, creatively speaking, if you just let it go and give it away. There's too much to keep track of, right? And let's face it, what really is original? I write about that in my new book, The Creativity Leap. I write about what actually is original anymore, right? So it's all about the remix. So chuck those fears aside, get on with the business of identifying how you're uniquely creating value, and create some value. Okay, one more person, please share. Anybody?
Unmute here.
Hey, Mark.
Hi. We looked at mine, and I'm a technical writer, so it's mostly content, diagrams, helping to do things, helping someone do a task or document a procedure. And so, but a lot of my writing is hidden. Like, I work for power companies, and that cannot be shared ever. It's just, that's the way they are. And so, writing more blog posts and having a few more samples, although it's not anything like what I'm going to write for my customer. It's, at least something more recent that they can see.
Yeah.
And when I looked on your little list of all these ways, technical writer seems to do just about every single one of them, with very few
Give me an
exceptions.
example.
Well, like customer satisfaction. If it's outside documentation that customers use, you've used products with poor documentation, or good, or where it's good, like when you don't have to call tech support,
Right.
to answer a question.
Sorry, Mark. So let's continue that. So because of that, because customers are more satisfied, that means what in terms of business value? When customers are more satisfied,
they're much easier to retain.
They're easier to retain, right? Awesome. So you don't have acquisition costs, right?
Exactly. It seems like a lot of industry, like a lot of products, they're all obsessed with bringing people in, that so-called marketing marketing funnel. And then once they've captured the customer, they completely ignore them.
Yeah. So it's one thing to know these things, Mark, is a totally different thing to articulate it, to state it, right? So that you're doing the work for your clients, potential clients, to help them understand how you're solving their problems from a business impact perspective. When they have to make a decision about whether or not to set aside budgeted dollars for you or somebody else, when you can do that translation work for them, even better, right? So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so we're at 12:59. Okay, I just want to share my screen one last time. And what I wanted to show you is that if you liked what you heard from me today, if you would like to stay in touch, I'd love to hear back from you. You can text the word create to the number 33777. You can also just email me, Natalie@figure8thinking.com. And what I'd love to do in exchange is two things. I'd love to send you a free sample chapter from my new book, The Creativity Leap. And I'd also love to send you what I call the Business Value Translator Worksheet. I'd like to share those two things with you. If you want to just follow up with me, text the word create to the number 33777, and I'd love to do that. And thank you so much, guys. This was awesome. And I'll hand it back over to Alex.
Thank you. We've got a little tradition here at Philly Freelance. Our version of applause looks a little like spirit fingers. So fingers up, big round of applause for Natalie. Thank you so much. This is great. I was excited to see where you would take this. I think you over-delivered in a lot of ways. That business value translator worksheet is absolute gold. I'm excited to share that with folks. Definitely get in touch with Natalie. Also, we'll be sharing the recording and those resources out to the list like we always do. You'll be hearing from Catherine and I a little bit later about plans for our next session. We're going to pick up that panel that we meant to do a couple weeks ago, had to reschedule, panel with some business owners who have hired freelancers and consultants during the pandemic about how their perspective has changed while all of this is going on, and how we can think about that communication, like Natalie was just saying, from their point of view. So I'm excited to have that put together. Keep these going. Natalie, you rock. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you.
You rock too.
coming out today. Looking forward to seeing you again next time. And stay cool. Be well.
All
Have a
right.
great day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.